welcome to The Finder of Lost Things, exploring your superpowers of trust, healing and transformation, with me, Hannah Belton. My brother, Christian, disappeared in Mali, Africa in 2003. He disappeared without a trace. We lost his story, we didn't have closure, we lost so much. I was fighting and searching to find Christian when actually I just needed to sit in stillness and attract him in. I was so resistant to doing this, but I had to surrender. It's a process of trusting and finding the lost pieces and integrating them. This podcast will uncover the process that Christian and I went on to find the lost things, him, and to find the parts of me that were missing.
And we were destined from the start to tell our story into the dark, for we were born to a great white shark.
Hello everybody, hi, welcome, come on in as always. I hope everybody's had a good week. I've had an interesting week. I'm going to bring Christian straight up actually, because he's going to be with me for this episode, and I feel from now on, so after this show we've only got 6 episodes left. Time has gone so quickly, but he's definitely moved in alongside me in meditations this week. So a couple of days ago, we were actually the last episode with Kerry, we were talking about twin souls and and I had a sort of remembering come through, but I couldn't quite speak about it. So I want to bring that thread through into this session about how Christian and I are connected, how we became connected. And this is such a personal episode. I didn't think I was ever going to be talking about this, but it seems I have to. This is part and parcel of what we have to spread, the messages we have to spread, really. So Christian came through to me this week. He showed me, so we've talked before about Akashic records, so our soul records, so everything that our souls have ever thought, actioned, past lives, all the way, so they contain our sort of history, our soul history. So I was standing in front of my door, we have it as a door, and Christian suddenly appeared to my left, which is where he always sits, and he opened his door at the same time. So we were both standing in front of our records, and this energy was coming out towards us both. We then turned with our backs to our doors, so the energy was coming in through our back, so we were receiving all our knowledge, wisdom, everything we've been through. And he just held my hand, and both our souls were combined with our hands holding, and it was almost like our two souls are now going to tell the true story of how we connected. I don't know if you can see on my hand, I've got this patch here that's appeared. It's been there for quite a while actually. If you're not watching on video, it's a really dried part of my hand, in the shape, well, it's kind of like in the shape of a heart, I guess, in the top of middle of my palm, and it crosses the 3 fingers at the top, and you can feel heat in it. And this kind of shows to me that this is, our hands are connections of our heart. So our heart comes out through our hands essentially, and Christian and I are kind of like holding hands, and he's on my left side. When we did our live films together, he would always come into my left side as well. He would appear. So this is the first time in a long time since actually doing the films so January 2019, it's the first time he's appeared next to me. Like I can really feel him next to me. So he's energetically come back down to be with me for now. So what we have to share this evening is like combination of both of our soul stories, and it shows you how connected we have been through so many lives. And if anybody's listening to this and they're either in grief or they're separated from somebody who they feel totally connected to, like we had Kerry last week, you'll find something in this show for you, I'm sure. To start off this evening, I really have to tell you, so when Christian was lost and I couldn't find him, I'd done all my trials on social media and everything, I went into stillness because I had to. I handed everything over to God or the divine, the universe, and was like, you've got to find him because I can't do any more. And I went into stillness. It was the only option open to me because nothing had worked in the physical, in the external world. And this week, in fact, the last couple of days, I've been reminded of this fairy tale called The Red Shoes, which is the version I'm going to quickly tell you now, sort of shows why I'd gotten myself into such a state. So this young girl, she's motherless. She's young. She lives in the forest. She fashions herself a pair of shoes. They're not great, but she relies on her instincts and creates for herself a pair of shoes which will take her through life. On her way through the forest, she sees a carriage which stops, and there's an old lady in there who says, look, come and live with me. I'll look after you. I'll give you all the red shoes that you can possibly have. And she's like, oh, okay, I'll go with you. And in doing that, as she grows up, she then has to conform to the old lady's wishes. She has to go to church. She has to stop dancing everywhere. She has all her freedom curtailed, and she wishes for these red shoes that she originally had. And the story goes on that she tries to, she's told actually she can't wear these red shoes because they're too bright. She can't wear them in church because, they're blasphemous, I guess, in some way. And she still wears them because the old lady is going blind and can't really tell what color shoes she's got on. So she wears these red shoes. And there's a soldier at the door, an injured soldier at the door, and he puts a curse on these red shoes to always be dancing. So he says to the little girl, these, I can't quite remember what the words are, but it doesn't sound particularly like a curse, but it is put on this. And essentially she spends the whole time getting down the shoes from the top shelf. She's like addicted to these shoes. She can't keep away from them. And every time she puts them on, she starts dancing. And then she can't stop. And it becomes, like this thing which takes over her, and it's external to her. And in the end, she's at death's door because she can't stop dancing in these shoes. And she actually goes to a woodcutter and asks the woodcutter to chop her legs off because she can't get these shoes off, or to cut her feet off. And in the end, that's what happens to get rid of this curse. She has her feet cut off and becomes a cripple, which is, they are grim fairy tales, these are, but it essentially shows, she's starved of her own creativity and using her, she's gone into people pleasing, into this sort of victim mentality, and she's addicted to these shoes. But what she actually needed to do, and what I needed to do, it's hard work, but instead of grabbing for those red shoes, is to actually work with what you have. So your initial skills of being able to make your own shoes, and you craft them, and you get better and better and better at using your own crafting. And through, using your voice and your vision and your values, you can regain what you've lost, and you can regain your insight, and you can do your healing, and, heal that instinct, which has sort of been taken away from you by what other people think, and people telling you what you must do. So that story kept coming back to me this week. And then I had, the eagle started to appear again. I don't know if you can see that. I'm just showing on the screen. There's a silver bangle with a golden eagle on it. Now, when I started doing my stillness, so I'd done the kind of red shoe analogy, that sort of metaphor, and I was like, right, I have to look after myself. I have to go back to what I know, and that was to start using my intuition and actually to listen and to try and reach Christian in a way that was within me. We had already started to connect. I'd had lucid dreams about him. We had connected in our dreams, but I disregarded all of those and actually went with like going on this social media search for him to try and find him externally, when I really should have just been keeping the internal communication with Christian. Maybe I should talk about this now. So Christian and I was on one of my first meditations that I did. I was given a pair of wings, like a pair of eagle wings, and I was like, what am I supposed to do with this? Thanks very much, but how is this going to help me? And I was told to just put them on and to just sort of start flapping my arms and see how they felt. And I did this visually in my meditation, and I very slowly started to lift off the ground, and I got a sense of lightness and a sense of a new perspective on life. So anyway, I in my first meditation, I reached pretty high. I was always above, funnily enough, I was always above like a canyon. It felt like a sort of American canyon, and there was always mountains, not huge, not mountain ranges, but sort of clumps of rocks, but high up. And I was up there, and I could hear. I was sort of looking around, getting used to this bird's eye view, and I could hear other screeching, like other calling from eagles, but I couldn't see anybody, or I couldn't see any other eagles, and I couldn't use my voice. I couldn't I don't know what eagles do. What do? They cry. Let's just call them the cry of the eagle. I couldn't do that. My throat was blocked. And after a while, I kept going up in this eagle using my wings, and I actually got this I think I got this bangle at the time, because at the time I was given my wings, my husband the day I was kind of given my wings, later on that day, I was in the car and I was driving through this there's this road that's through a golf course, so there's golf course on both sides and there's quite high trees, and out of nowhere, this eagle, I swear to you, this eagle came right towards me and missed the car and went on my side of the car I was driving. And I could see it's like amber eye, almost like in my vision. And I was so shocked, but I sort of carried on driving. And at one point I was like, have I really just seen an eagle after visualizing and being one? Anyway, I went into town, and then I came back and I told my husband, and he was like, oh wow, okay, that's are you sure? And I'm like, well, I'm not really sure. But anyway, later on that evening, he was walking on the golf course, and this blooming eagle went across over his head really low, and he got a photo of it. And he came home and he was like, I don't understand this, but I've just seen this eagle as well. And it was actually, and then I asked one of the mums at our school, and she'd seen it before as well. It's actually like they think it's an escaped eagle, which lives, it obviously has a huge range, but it just happened to come through on that day. And we've had another eagle incident. Actually, it was with Dad. We went up to Skye, which is an island off the west coast of Scotland. in the Highlands, and it was the first time we went to Skye. It was one of my parents and my family, and Dad went off. He's a very keen bird watcher, and he went off into just around the headland where we were staying, and he came back and said, I've just had the most incredible experience with this golden eagle. And he was I've got chills now, like he was literally above this golden eagle circled over Dad's head for about 30 seconds, really low, and he just couldn't believe it. And all the way along this time we thought Christian was still alive. When I look back now, and when Christian can look back now, it was very obvious that this eagle was connected to Christian, because as we go on with the story, I, in my meditations, started to get a visit from this goddess called Isis. ISIS. Obviously, like she's she told me at the time, and she's still furious that her name has been taken over by terrorists. So I didn't actually like talking about Isis very much because it always had that connotation. But Isis came to me, and I didn't know who she was, but she came to me. I was introduced to her, and she sat on my left-hand side. See, my voice, I'm finding this really difficult to talk about. Anyway, she sat on my left-hand side. And when I first met her, she didn't say anything, but I just knew who she was. And she could vibrate my body. She was so powerful, and she still is, but she could vibrate my body. And she was vibrating all this sadness and fear from my body. I could feel it. And she was sort of saying, well, you know, sadness is inevitable with what you're going through with Christian. And I'm sorry for all your sadness, but it's a necessary part, and it will be rewarded in time without fail. I promise you. And then she said, I've wrote all this. I've got hundreds. Well, I've already said before, I've got loads of journals. I write everything down. And then she said, in the meantime, keep the faith, project the love, collect the people, and make the speeches. So I was like, I didn't understand what she was talking about. So then I started to look up about Isis, and if anyone knows the story, I'll do a very quick précis of it. But basically, there's Isis, who is very, very attached to Osiris. Who's actually a very passive figure. He's a masculine figure. He has a great affinity with water and a connection to the underworld. And he's like the innocent victim, or the helpless one who suffers in this story. But he and Isis at one time ruled together, and they fell in love with each other in the womb, it said. So they're united even before they were born. And Osiris wanted to travel the world. So they were ruling the kingdom. He wanted to travel the world, so Isis was left at home. I mean, you can understand now why I was like, oh, okay, this is an interesting story. This sounds just like Chris and I. Anyway, so he went off wandering the world, and he was attacked by Set, who actually murdered him whilst he was traveling away from Isis. Now, I think Set was some sort of brother or some other sort of cousin, maybe something like that, and he drowned Osiris in the River Nile. Obviously Christian was in the River Niger, but the same sort of thing in Africa. Isis and her sister Nephthys, I'm probably saying that wrong, but they were obviously grief stricken. And they're in some of the stories, they're referred to as kites, so the birds, like wailing women. And so they search for the body. Okay, they search for the body all the time, and without the body in Egypt, there was no chance of resurrection. So they really, really wanted to find the body. Isis actually, and at the time mourning was seen, so grieving was seen as an essential part of the process towards the resurrection of the deceased. So grief, the really powerful emotion of grief and the energy that you put into mourning, was actually, they felt, transferred into Heka, Heka, and that, which can then be used to revive the deceased. So that's like it's magic, essentially. So Osiris was attacked. He was in the river. He was put into a coffin, I guess, some sort of something which actually washed up onto the shore. And this is what Isis found. So she found her brother's body, and she hid it because she didn't want Set to find it. But Set did find it. He got the dogs, and he found Osiris's body, and he tore the body into pieces. Now, there's lots of stories around this. There's, you know, he's tore it into lots of different pieces and lots of numbers, but essentially, she then had to, she was obviously distraught. She then had to go and pick up all the missing pieces of her brother and bring them back together. And she used her magic that she'd been mourning, and she actually used her magic to she had like feathers that she wafted over the body, over the bits, and they all came together. And it said that the magic of Isis gives the hearts back. Now, the hearts contain the wisdom, memory, and emotion, which is so critical for survival in the afterlife. And it reveals a person's true character. She was able to bring him back together. And he then came back to life. He couldn't come back in the physical life, but he, as a spirit, and lived in the underworld. And they actually, through magic, it wasn't a sexual thing, but through magic, they conceived a child called Horus, who was the Horus is an eagle, not an eagle. Oh, there's a feather just dropped. I've just noticed a feather drop outside the window. A hawk. So, I mean, I was sort of reading this going, oh, wow. Okay, so I can understand why Isis has come to me. I totally understand it. She has the magic powers to bring the missing pieces back together. And she came to help me. And once I'd sort of read the story about this brother and sister who ruled, I was like, okay, I understand that. I want that power. I don't want to be the red shoes anymore. That sort of story. I want to be like Isis. I want to have her powers. I want to have her magic. Now, this just reminds me, I actually did a post on Facebook on my private, on my Hannah Velton page this week. And I actually said that I had been alchemizing grief since 2012. And I had a dream in the middle of the night, one of these 4 a.m. wake up calls. And I was actually told that I'd been alchemizing grief since 2012. This was this week. And I put the post out to explain that, we set up this, I turned into a ghostwriter for life stories because we had lost Christian's story. And I wanted to help other people to write their life story before it was too late, so that their families would have their stories. And the first gentleman who came forward, he came forward straight away in one of those really weird ways, like he'd been in the doctor's surgery and just happened to see our advert. And then his friend had also talked about us, and he was like, oh, must go in to see them. Anyway, so I went to meet him. Unbeknown to me, we were just, I just thought we were doing his story. but he had this huge history of grief. You know, a father who died very young, an adored father who died very young when he was very young. He'd lost 2 wives to cancer. He'd had all this trauma. He'd worked in the London Met Police. He'd witnessed trauma. He'd been part of trauma. He had so much that he needed to release and grieve and mourn. And by just sitting, listening to him and talking to him, I could get his story out. And he, like, you could see him over the weeks, like, just transform. And all these coincidences in inverted commas started happening, and all these people from his past started coming into his life, and he had like literally a renewed sense of joy and living and resolve to like really live the rest of his life. But why I'm saying this is that on the way to meet him, so this was 2012, where I was still totally denying my grief and stuck in grief. I had down the left hand side of my body, if you cut me in half from toe to tip of my head, it felt like I had ice water poured into me. So literally my whole body went ice cold. And I stopped the car because I was like, oh, I'm going to crash in a minute. And it stayed like that for quite a long time. But I had an MRI scan because I went to the doctors and it was all unexplained. I had 2 MRI scans 6 months apart. Nothing, it was totally unexplained. But my brain, the guy actually said to me, you've got the brain of it looks like you've got the brain of an 80-year-old on one of your sides, because it's really, there's lesions on it, it's cloudy. And he said, I can't understand it. Have you had a bash to the head or a, you know, something like that? And I was like, no, I'd maybe fallen off a pony when I was little, but I had certainly had no history of that. So anyway, I put this on Facebook and people started to reply saying, and I sort of had said that coldness that came into my body was actually the first time that I started receiving from spirit. So I hadn't had that at all before, but I was obviously there to meet with this gentleman to help him through his grief. And I inadvertently was working with spirit to help him release it. The reason I'm saying that is where in the comments, lots of people commented and liked, and somebody said to me, or you're in fact quite a few people said on my Instagram as well, you know, you're a very powerful person. And like Christian's come back, he said yes you are. And the reason I'm powerful is because I worked with Isis, is because I learnt how to find the missing pieces of myself and of Christian to use my magic. And I'll go into that in a minute. At the same time, and with this blow to the head, that's interesting because this is the next part I was going to tell you about. I had, so Christian and we have shared many past lives. Okay, many past lives. I can tell you 2 of these now. I did these in, when did I do these? So these were October 2017. So this was just after I'd sort of met Isis, and she showed me these 2 lives. Now, one of them, there was an eagle, there was a bear, and there's a wolverine, and there was me in snow in furs. I was wrapped in furs, and I was warm, but I was looking up at the sky, and I could see these eagles swirling above me, and I could see I thought it was a Canadian maple leaf. There were pine trees, there was snow. It was very bright, but the snow was falling, and I was getting covered. But I kind of knew my brother was coming for me, so it was all going to be okay. And as the snow was falling down and I was getting covered, I was like, no, he's going to come. He's going to come and get me. He's fine. And he did. And I don't know if it was Christian, but this boy appeared and he pulled me up and I hugged him. And he said to me, like, you're safe now, little sis. And I said, like, I knew you'd come for me. And that was one of the past lives. And then the second past life kind of explains why I've got this head thing. Not that you can see, and I'm totally normal. But I was dressed in, it looked like I was in Greece. So I had a very long white dress on. It was quite low cut, like a priestess gown, very long, down right to the floor. I had blonde hair, and I was like Amazonian tall. It was like very tall and very strong looking. But I had I was there, and I had a I suddenly felt this slash down the right side of my face. Why the right side is patriot, yeah, okay, down the right side of my face, but with a sword or a knife, and it knocked me down on the floor, and I was kicked and I was stamped on, and I was kind of like cowering, covered in blood, just on this rug on a floor. And I was, whoever was there that had done it to me, they then left, and I was still I was just still lying on the floor, and I was hidden, and I was scared. But there was a man above me who came in, and I wasn't really sure of who it was, but it felt like family. And he's saying, you can't be a priestess anymore, like you're subservient now. He knew how powerful I was, and he was like, no more of this, you know, you're bringing our family into disrepute now. And he kept me in submission, and there was another more slashes across my right cheek. So this right is like masculine power. It's like patriarchy. It's like, you cannot be a priestess anymore. It's just not allowed. But then as time came on, so I think I must have moved forward in this visualization, but this lady came to me, and she rescued me. Okay, she was a very tall lady. Oh, I've got chills. Oh God, this is really emotional. She's standing before me. Oh, and she picks me up, and she's like, you know how you pick a child up and you put them down in front of you, and she sort of, she said, you have to stand as a priestess again. Once again, you might be scarred, but you're still very powerful, and you must move back into that power. Okay, you need to learn that strength has been inside you all along, and that you cannot be cowed, and you cannot be kept quiet. Everything that you need is in yourself. You need the courage to rise alone. Okay, you need the courage to rise again. You are gifted. I was then gifted this right to teach and heal again. And she said, you had to do it. You have to do that proudly, like scars and all. You have to do it proudly. So I don't know if this is resonating with anybody out there, but there's this huge, like this is the time when I always hear that there's a bird tribe out there. If you're listening to this and you're getting chills or something like that, like, we are all supposed to be rising right now. This is our time where we are back to our priestesses, and we will not be cowed, and we will tell our story. And my voice is actually going a bit freer now. So for me, the energy that helped me was Isis. And she, part of what I had to do was revisit a holy Celtic site. And that binded me with Christian. So I completely forgot about that, actually. And then skip, I can't even think where it was. It was maybe 5 months later or so. I actually visited Cornwall to Tintagel, and there is, very close to there is St Nectan's Glen, which is waterfalls, which is magical, which is you can go there, and there's an area, there's a little sort of cabin where you have you're praying to the goddess. And I sat in there and I prayed to Isis to find Christian. And actually, when I was in the waterfalls, I'm just hearing this, like when I was down walking through the waterfalls, I picked up some of the water and I was washing it, washing my hands in it, and then I put it over my face. and it was it went in my boots, so it was everywhere, this holy water. And that, to me, straight after that, like the next day, I've told this story before, but I was walking along the cliffs and I heard, "You are the finder of lost things. This is a great responsibility." So it was almost as though I had received my initiation from Isis, and I was now allowed to be the finder of lost things. Now, I have to say that working with Isis, how I did it was I got some Isis oracle cards. And so every day I would meditate, and then every day I would choose some oracle cards, and whatever that came up, I think I did a big spread once a week, and then every day maybe had one card. And she literally guided me along. Whatever I needed, she provided with these cards. And she was my guide. There's no other way of saying it. She was my guide and my leader, and she taught me how to use how to unearth and remember and allow my powers to come through. If you've had a visit from Isis or any of the goddesses, like, you'll know what I mean when I say you feel completely held and supported and loved, and you can't do this kind of healing journey alone. And I say that healing journey, at the time, I still thought Christian was alive. Okay, I hadn't even touched my grief, but she was preparing me for my role now, essentially. And at one point, she actually said, okay, so I need to tell you about the, like, when I actually, the next bit to tell you is, at some point I was ready and I had learned enough. So this was actually November 30th of November 2017. So it was only about November, October. It was probably about a month after I'd been working with her, because I worked with her every day. Like, I stopped all my writing, I stopped my job. I just went into, my husband was very worried about me. He was like, I couldn't understand why I was just sitting up in our bedroom in my chair, just meditating, and I think he thought I was going mad, but at the time it was the only thing that I could do. It was like my mission. And then he's on the 30th of November, she said to me, "You can get back in touch with Christian now," because I'd sort of cut out sort of the dreaming that we were doing together and the meditation. And she said, "You're ready to meet him now as the eagle." I was like, "Oh, okay." So I went back into she said, "Get in touch with Christian and tell him that you're ready to receive him with open wings, open arms. Tell him not to be scared. You will be able to hold him now. You have regained all your powers and magic ability. He will trust your words and be very relieved, as he's been carrying so much, wanting for you to return for him. It is now your turn to revive him. We will show him to you in your reality, physically, in form. Don't be afraid of him. He is your brother, Christian, although greatly changed. You will know it's him." Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so I went into the meditation, and sure enough, I've got it down here, I couldn't believe how much I'd changed, because I hadn't been in my eagle form for quite a long time. But anyway, I went up and I was like, "Oh my, I'm really powerful now." I sort of rose up very quickly. Obviously my vibration, I'd gone from being totally in grief, very heavy vibration, stranded on the floor, unable to rise, unable to, like, I was crippled, if we go back to the red shoes. I then was using my wings. I was flying up. I was graceful. I was seeing a higher vibrational picture. And anyway, Christian, I've written it here. He says, Han. He like literally screamed Han. I could hear him, and he came out at me at full force, and he crashed into me. He goes, "I've been waiting for you for so long to return." Then he saw how strong I was. And I said to him, "Look, I've been away learning. I've been building myself back up. and sort of apologized that I'd been away for so long. And he said, like, I said to him, like, I can now support you. You can come home. I know what's, you know, I didn't know what to do before, but I'm strong enough now. I'm strong enough for you to come home. I'm going to be able to support you. I'm going to look after you. You know, it couldn't have happened before now because I was not myself. I was not whole. I didn't know how powerful I was. And he was like, oh my God. And we lifted off the ground together, like into the sky. And he couldn't believe I was with him, because I'd always known he was there, because I could hear, I knew there were other eagles around, and I'd actually learnt to use my voice, but I still couldn't attract the eagles in. But now, like, Christian and I were together, and we were like flying loops and crying out together, and we sort of said that we could stay as birds now in spirit and watch our physical bodies get reunited. Like, we could watch from above. And like, he was trusting me that I would be able to help him now, because at that point he still thought he was alive as well. Then like, all we could say was like, wow, we were so overawed by the whole thing. And we'd been rebirthed, like, we'd met back in spirit. So in this life, this is really important, I'm being told. So like, Chris and I, and this is where possibly the twin flame telepathy comes in. But we, in this life, had been reunited in our spirit form, and consciously, that's really important. Anyway, just after that, I actually heard that I was speaking at the Missing People Christmas concert, and I actually was asked to write a letter to Christian. And in this letter, I wrote about being very sure that Christian and I were now connected in spirit. I was really honest. I showed Mum and Dad the letter, and they were like, are you sure you're going to say that? I was like, no, I have to say it. Anyway, so I said in this letter that I read out at the carol service, I don't know if I've said this before, but it was actually being recorded by Davina McCall was there, and it was being recorded by long lost families. So there's a record of it somewhere, because I was filmed doing it. And in it, I was talking about, you know, we'd met in spirit now. I was very sure about that. And I was now a lighthouse. I was like a beacon, and just drawing Christian in the physical. And I was absolutely convinced that Christian was coming into the physical. And he was convinced. He's like, right, I'm going to, this is going to be great watching this. Let's reunite. And obviously he didn't come back in his physical form. He came back in his spirit form. But actually, the people's reaction is important, actually, to say. After I'd finished reading my letter to Christian, I went to like the after party for it, and there were so many people that obviously they were all missing families with missing people, and so many people came up, and they were sort of saying, oh, you know, siblings are so overlooked when people go missing. It's always the parents that are you know, in the spotlight. And I think that's the same when children die as well. You know, the brothers and sisters are overlooked in terms of it mainly. And like, everyone sort of came up to me like they were all a bit sort of wide-eyed, and a bit I felt like I was emanating this power. And I was saying all along in this letter that I was just pouring out unconditional love. That was how I was going to attract Christian in. And it just hit a nerve with people at the concert. But then what happened? I did the concert. Oh, that's it. Oh God, yeah, I did the concert. And I should have had a clue as to what was going on. Like, Isis was telling me all the time that Christian was going to be changed. We'd meet, but Christian was going to be changed. And I didn't really have a clue that what was going on. I still wasn't grieving. Anyway, in January 2018, so that was like not like a few weeks after I'd done my letter to read it out at the Missing People concert, I had this I think it was Isis, but I heard this word hedge witch that came into my head, and it kept being repeated, and I was like, what is that? What is that? I didn't know what a hedge witch was, and I looked it up in the dictionary, because like at one point I thought, I can't be making that up, because I don't even know what it is. So I looked it up, and essentially a hedge witch is a witch who sits in the hedge, metaphorically, obviously, which divides the physical to the non-physical. Okay, so when I say I'm now a spirit messenger, that's how I've kind of toned it down, because I was told it as a hedge witch. So essentially you're a conduit between, you're a messenger between the realms, and you can use this power to help other people, support other people, and to bring messages of love. There's nothing fearful or spooky about it. It's just what I do. Anyway, I then talked to her again, to Isis, and I was like, well, what am I going to do with this? Because I don't need this, you know. What is this? Because Christian's just, he's going to turn up in a minute. And I even did, after the concert, I actually had the so I think it's called the Daily Telegraph, so one of the broadsheets in the UK, do an article on me saying, no, Christian's definitely going to come home, or we've connected, he's definitely coming home. I had the local news. It then went onto the BBC website, so all people around the world. In fact, at one point it was trending higher than, I think Harry had just announced his engagement to Meghan. I think that's right. And Christian was like, my story about Christian saying, oh yeah, he's going to come home soon, after how many years was it at that point? So 18. Yeah, so after 15 years, I'm sure he's going to come home, was all there trending away. And I still didn't grab the significance of it. Anyway, I think in the end, she was like, okay, this is obviously going to take longer than we thought. And in February 2018, I got the message from Isis that it was going to take 3 years and 4 months for the next section of my evolution, my growth, my healing, my transformation. I was like, really? What? I didn't believe it. I wrote it down. I kind of wrote it down with like question marks next to it. Like, are you sure? That's ridiculous. Christian's going to turn up in a minute. How can it be another? Anyway, so from that time until now, which is actually 3 years and 4 months, like I found that today and I checked it out. I was like, wow, okay, so in between those 3 years and 4 months, I have essentially been grieving. I have been moving through my grief with Christian, having found him in spirit. Like after she told me the 3 years and 4 months, February, March, April, May. Yeah, I found him on the 1st of May. So it was only a few months later. I then found out the truth about Christian. He found out the truth about his being in spirit. And that's why I kind of say it was almost a relief in the end, because we knew. And at that time, we knew we were so connected in spirit that when the news came through that, yeah, he was in spirit, we were never going to meet again in the physical, as a physical bodies, it was traumatic for like a few days. I was like, oh God, really? I'm never going to see him again? I'm never going to see you again physically. But then we just started talking to each other. We started writing together. I could hear his voice. I knew we were so connected. so connected in spirit. And yeah, so then when I was told, you know, this is going to take 3 years, sorry, I then almost that day or later after that, I then joined the missing people choir and had my first rehearsal. So that was the beginning of my real initiation into the grief process. That's when I'm hearing this now. That's when I moved through my real mourning and my more started to grieve properly, when I was in a room with people who were in grief, in fear, in stagnated, because I felt I'd moved on, and I was now with Christian sort of in spirit at that point. Although I was still waiting for him to come in the physical, I was on a so much higher vibe. I was like the eagle. We were flying together up high. And I just couldn't, I found it so difficult being in the choir, and I've talked about this in a previous episode. So I won't go into it any more on that. But Isis was there, and she knew this was going to take another 3 years, 4 months to move through the grief, to not only find out that Christian was indeed in spirit, but to move through the process of being with Christian in spirit and telling family, telling friends, starting to work with other people, starting to receive for other people. I've had a 3-year, I call it, it's like an apprenticeship. I've had a 3-year apprenticeship, actually consciously knowing what I'm doing, and moving through and finding what I can do with spirits, with moving energy, with shape shifting, with all these things that I've been learning and remembering. You know, this process it's like you're just evolving the whole time. I'm learning every day. And so when Christian, so this afternoon, I have to tell you what happened this afternoon. So Christian and I this week, so we have our souls, all our stories, our souls are now into coming into us. All right, Christian's here on my left-hand side. He's holding my hand. This afternoon, I did a meditation with Natasha, who was in episode 11. And it was an Akashic Records. I'm feeling really sick suddenly. Oh, anyway, we did this meditation, and Christian and I actually were in one eagle body. So instead of being separate eagles, we are now one body. This is maybe why I'm feeling ill, because it's so big. We're now in one body. Okay, we are two souls, like back in one body in this life. Okay, this, I'm hearing like this hasn't happened before. This is new for us. And this is what we came here for. Interesting. Okay, so this soul that we are, a combined soul, like the twin souls, we're now together again fully in this life. And this is when we start to spread our love and what happened to us. And it's going to reach whoever needs to hear it. Oh, okay. This is the beginning of the real, like, next adventure. Chris is here now. Okay. Ooh, okay. So, like, if you think of the divine energy that I channel, I have known it as God. I've known it as the creator. I could know it as Isis as well. Isis and Osiris together. It's like a divine union. So you've got the masculine and the feminine, and they are both empowered. Okay, they're not disempowered, like lost in chaos, not trusting themselves, like they're empowered. Christian and I are both empowered. We've both come together. I can be the receiving whatever's coming in as the empowered feminine. I this came through actually in a masterclass I did this week. It's all just tied together this week. As an empowered feminine, I'm receiving. Okay. I then need to ask my empowered masculine, whether that is within me or whether it is in Christian, but we are combined now. So we are one. It's like the divine energy in two parts. Like I can ask him to support me and to help me to do, to get things done. Obviously being in spirit, if you've been following this program, this show, he has been bringing people to me all the time. I asked him yesterday I'm asking you, Chris, I'm receiving all this stuff that we need to do now. I can see contracts coming towards us. I can see things that we're signing. I can see big things happening. Chris, you need to support me. You need to get things done. And he's like, already this morning, people are coming to me for support and help. They've had the chills and they've had the niggles come in. So like, I know something big is happening. I am ready for this adventure now. Like, I'm so ready. And Isis has come back to like today. I hadn't thought about her for probably years. She's now back here. And Christian's obviously here as well now. So we'll see what happens. There's definitely there's something big. I don't know what's going to happen next week, but I suspect something's going to happen before I next talk to you. So we'll see how that goes. But sending so much love to everybody. And I hope this has given you some hope and some inspiration maybe, and some empowerment, because like everything you need is within inside of you. You just need to remember it and stand in your power and use your voice. Because if you use your voice, other people can hear you and you can attract in your team, I don't want to say tribe, but people who are like you, who are on the same vibration, call them in. But you need to be like on a high vibration to be able to use your voice and have it reach out. Okay, lots of love, and I'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to The Finder of Lost Things. I think we've been triggered so long and so hard by COVID, and it's going to carry on. People are getting used to stillness, and they're getting used to more solitude, but how do you use that time for the highest good? This process that we're going to explore will bring back the joy and purpose to life. That wholeness, that sort of harmony and flow and togetherness. People are really ready to find their lost parts now. You can find me at hannahvelton.online.
Views expressed on this program are those of the host, guests, and callers, and do not necessarily reflect the views of the station, its management, or advertisers. You're listening to Transformation Talk Radio.